Welcome to Mental Healthy, the podcast where we share stories of the professionals and experts worldwide working in the mental health field. Here's your host, Dr. Kenyon Knapp.
Well, welcome everyone to the Mental Healthy Podcast. I'm glad to have you with us here today. I've got two special guests with me here today, as you can see, and one furry friend. So let me let my guests introduce themselves if you want to begin.
Yeah. Sure, I'm Kieth Shaw. This is Harry, and I am the executive director of Harry's Doghouse, which is obviously founded after this cute little puppy here who is, as you can see, is just so adorable. He loves to snuggle, and we're going to talk a little bit about what he does with the kids. And speaking of kids, I have two Liberty students here that are outside the studio here, and one is a freshman and one is a senior, Alexander and Christopher.
That's great. That's great. Well, I appreciate you being here today. And my other guest.
I'm Dana Kasper, and I get to be a professor here as a flame at Liberty University. I teach in the Counselor Education and Supervision Department and am a licensed professional clinical counselor and provide equine-assisted psychotherapy to treat mental health disorders. And love that I founded Reigns of Freedom in 2016, a charitable nonprofit doing research on the horse and human connection.
Wow. So you're getting the vibe now, people, that what we're talking about today is animals and animal-assisted therapy, which I think is so cool. I mean, it's such a creative way to help people. And let's begin with you, Kieth. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how did you start, Harry's Doghouse?
Well, Harry's Doghouse started out, my wife and I, my two boys, we absolutely love dogs. We're dog people.
Yeah.
And we've decided that we wanted to mix it with one of our other passions, which is travel.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to have a dog who would travel around the country and visit different children's organizations, veterans homes, nursing homes, and disaster areas. And we spent a lot of time. Harry got to be picked out of a lot of different dogs around the country. We actually interviewed about 20 different breeders around the country, and we absolutely loved the one that we picked him from. And we had a certain look, we had a certain type of dog that we wanted. And Harry was, out of 40 dogs, he was the one. So we were truly blessed with him and his mission.
Yeah. Well, tell the guests a little bit more about where do you go with Harry and what do you do?
So let me tell you a little bit also about Harry. He's a golden doodle. Everybody always asks what type of dog is he? He's a golden doodle. Mm-hmm. And he's about 20 pounds right now, and he's almost full grown. Okay. So he's the perfect size dog to get up with the kids. Mm-hmm. We're very fortunate. This charity has grown much quicker than what we could ever expected. It's called Harry's Doghouse, and we have to remember it's hair. He's hair. He's not fur. So that's how I always remind people how to find his website. He's Harry's Doghouse, and we were very fortunate very early. You can't go down the street and not have somebody want to talk to you about the dog. Just today, I've been on campus for maybe 2 hours, probably talked to 100 different kids coming up and wanting to pet Harry. So he was very quickly found that the kids love him, and we very early in the charity formed a partnership with the Ronald McDonald Houses. And that's huge, to be able to go to these Ronald McDonald Houses and bring Harry to these kids who, quite honestly, some of them are there for a very extended period of time. They may have a dog at home and they don't get to see their dog. So to be able to bring a dog in for them to get to interact with, it's very special to them. And Harry has a great temperament. If you put him down with these kids on a wheelchair or on a rolling bed, he just snuggles up with them and just stays there. And it's an intuition that he knows that's where he's meant to be. And we feel really blessed with him as a dog. From our partnership with the Ronald McDonald Houses, we've had other organizations who then have reached out to us, and different children's cancer organizations. We've had multiple hospitals now who have partnered or wanting to partner up with us. And we are also in talks with Make-A-Wish to put some programming together with Harry. So we're really blessed with the fact that people want to have Harry there, and what we can do with giving these kids some comfort, the adults comfort. We also do a program called Hang with Harry, because we think it's just as important with adults. So we've had a major hospital in New Jersey. In fact, it's one of the major hospitals in the country called Deborah Hospital, one of the leading heart and lung hospitals in the world. And they heard about what we were doing, reached out. They had never had a program with dogs before. And the staff there came to us and said, we want to make this happen. We have questions. We have a lot of questions. We need to make sure that everything is in place. And 2 months later, Harry was there just 2 weeks ago doing his first event with the staff. And it was just amazing. I was with the president for about 10 minutes, standing there talking, and we're kind of in the background. And as we were talking there must have been at least 20 or 30 of his employees in the background, not meant for us to hear, saying, this is the best work day ever. We got to do this all the time. So since then, I just got an email while I was waiting to come in here from the president saying, we need to set up a meeting. We're going to do this on a quarterly basis. So, yeah.
That's so cool how animals can be so comforting and encouraging and all that.
Yeah.
Well, how about you, Dr. Kasper? What's your background that led you to work with animals?
I am from Kentucky, and so it's horse country, and I lived at horse camp in the summers. And at age 6, I got thrown badly off a horse. And so I'm scared of horses. So once I got licensed as a professional counselor, I got invited to a training on equine-assisted psychotherapy. And at that time, I was working with children who had experienced sexual abuse and physical abuse. And they often have low self-esteem and aren't assertive and can get re-victimized up to, 44 times. And what I experienced in this session was an increase in self-awareness and self-efficacy. And I thought, if I can learn this modality and give it with patience and increase their swag when they leave the barn, that's my heart. And as though I was scared of horses, I still felt the Lord pushing me towards that. Mm-hmm. And then we got given through a friend, a grandson of Secretariat, this hot, spicy, off-the-track racehorse called Batman. And, I just had such insight about myself. And my daughters were little then, trying to protect them from this very excited horse, who ended up helping hundreds of people. So that's kind of a snapshot of how I began with that.
Well, that's cool. Amazing. That's really cool. Well, both of you got a neat story, a neat background. Now, I know there's a lot of aspects of this that make it therapeutic for people, whether there's an abuse history or people with illnesses or things like that. And part of it relates to a stuffed animal program that you have with Harry. How do you use stuffed animals to help kids?
So one of the things that we wanted to have that we didn't see with other therapy dog programs, there's a lot of great therapy dog programs. Major hospitals have whole staff does therapy dog programs, so we know that they're important. But we wanted to go a step further. We wanted to not just bring Harry in and give that momentary time of comfort. We wanted it to be something a little more lasting. And in thinking about that, what do kids love? They love a stuffed animal. So I did some research on what else can I do with just a stuffed animal, and what can I add to it? And one of the articles that I had read was about the senses and how stuffed animals can help kids in different senses. So One of them is, and this is Harry, so this actually was designed to look like Harry. It's got a little medal on it that says Harry loves you, so that the kids know that Harry's there with them. But we also put in the paw, there's a bean bag in it, so the kids can squeeze the paw, and it gives them comfort. And then we did something else that we think is really what is amazing about this stuffed animal is it has actually a heart in it. There's a little zipper in the back of it, and it actually has a heart in it. And when you squeeze the heart, it actually beats. And when it's in the little stuffed animal here, all you do is you give it a little squeeze and it turns on and off. So when the kids are there having their treatments, it's hard enough for kids to sit still, let alone have these machines that are running and all of these things hooked up to them, and how their heart rate is just through the roof. Well, they hold this stuffed animal, and that heart gives them a little bit of comfort, and it sinks their heart down to it, and it really is a lasting memory that Harry was there, and then they have this little toy that gives them comfort. And you could probably talk about this a little bit too, but we have doctors and nurses come back to us and say the kids won't put it down when they're getting their treatments. They have to have it, and it's really heartwarming to hear stories like that.
And Dan, you mentioned previously that there's something about stuffed animals or the weight of them or something like that makes it therapeutic.
Yes, I know working with children with emotional disorders that often weight helps. With trauma survivors, weighted blankets help. But what I think is really interesting, Dr. Bruce Perry at childtrauma.org talks about how rhythm regulates the nervous system. So what you're doing is brilliant, because that's exactly it. Like I think part of the great thing about being outdoors with a horse is walking. And that rhythm regulates, the person if they're dysregulated, which is often present in a lot of trauma survivors. So, yeah, senses are amazing.
That is cool. Now, I know we're talking about Harry right now, but your expertise is with equine, with horses.
Yeah.
What is it about horses that's impactful in therapy? Like when you're using an animal to help somebody, what is it about a horse that can relate to people?
Well, first of all, I guess the underpinning of what I do is family therapy. And so they're in a herd like families, and they are social animals. So they respond like humans do, but they're often honest where humans aren't. And so I got curious about horses and why people were responding to them and having positive outcomes. So I ended up researching it and was really encouraged to see how attachment deficits in early childhood predict lifelong challenges in people. And interacting with the horses, because they're sentient beings, it can often increase attachment bonding agents because of chemosenses and vasopressin and the emotional glue that happens between a mother and a child, the first few months where attachment is felt. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things. Plus, research shows that people feel less judged, and they seem to trust a horse where if they have been abused, they might not trust human relationships. And then horses are, we emit odors like 3 feet out, and so they pick up on our senses, so they can read if the person is anxious or sad. And I think the Lord uses them to attend to the subconscious phenomena that a person is struggling with that they're not even aware of. And I think that's the beauty of it.
It is amazing
that they know, Dr. Horse is what I say. They know like what the person needs way more than me. And I know the Lord uses that. And I have the honor of standing back. And I love the approaches because it's less of me and it's more of their interaction because it's an experiential treatment.
Yeah, and it works somehow. You're doing research on it about how it works, but we don't totally understand how it works, but you've seen how it works and you've seen the effectiveness. Kieth, I know you tell a story sometimes about the first time you could really tell that Harry had an impact on people and how he helped people. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, I've got a lot of great Harry stories, but the very first time was actually one of the very first events that we did. And we were doing a meet and greet with Harry, and it was at a resort in Georgia. And Harry had a whole line of people waiting to take pictures with him. And a family came up, and it was a mother and a father, a son who was probably 5 or 6, and then a little girl who was about 3 years old. And all of them held Harry except for the little girl. And you can kind of see in the picture where she is standing about a foot away from the rest of the family because she was deathly afraid of dogs. She had never petted a dog before in her life. So we took the pictures with them, and then they came over and they were interested in the stuffed animals and what we were doing with them. And I handed the little girl a stuffed animal of Harry. And I sat down next to her, and I showed her how to turn it on, and she's here hugging and squeezing it. And Harry was just off of arm length of me. And I said, "Do you see how he looks just like Harry?" And she looked at me and she looked at him and kind of moved her eyes, and she said, "Yeah." I said, "They're best friends." And she said, "Oh." I said, "Harry likes him. You like him. Do you want to pet Harry?" And she said, "Okay." And I called Harry over, and she, as much as she was holding on to this, within 15 seconds, she was snuggling with Harry. And her mom and dad were just big smiles. They were just thrilled that just happened. So that was the first time that I saw a big impact with Harry, but there's been a lot of others.
That is so cool. Let me get a little theoretical on you though here. I know you talked about attachment theory a second ago.
Mhm.
What kinds of psychological theories work within animal-assisted therapy, and what populations benefit from this animal-assisted therapy, would you say?
Well, often I find at the barn that it's where office therapy has not worked.
Yeah.
And so it's all the people that have tried counseling in an office environment and they haven't had success. People struggling with autism are often attracted to horses. Again, I think it's that connection that is experienced between the two brains and how they connect to one another. And connection is fulfillment, it's what everybody's looking for and often doesn't have. I've worked with all ages, including a 93-year-old who we would put a chair, in the arena, and she would take breaks and sit down because she was still working on her trauma from early childhood at 93. And the horses spoke to her. So I'm certified in 2 different modalities. One is the equine-assisted growth and learning model. It is solution focused to where we believe you have the answer for the task that we may give you, putting on a halter, whatnot. It is also projective. So one of the horses might remind someone of their mother that passed. So it can be very therapeutic. It also is wonderful because you can build the problem in the barn using swimming noodles and hula hoops and cones and barrels, and people can build the environments where their problem is or something that represents their problem. It's almost like play therapy because it's experiential, and they get a different perspective of it because they've objectified it. And then the other model that I'm trained in is the trauma-focused equine-assisted psychotherapy, and I love that model because it is attachment-based. And it's building off relationships and the principles of a good relationship. And it's also, you're allowed to ride and, in it therapeutically where the other one is non-mounted. And they work off the neuroscience of rhythm regulating the nervous system through riding, as well as relationship with the horse and staying in connection with the horse. So I had like a boy who was sexually abused, and he was in middle school. He had echolalia, he was making sounds in class involuntarily and getting made fun of. So the school referred the mom to me. And so we just put him on a bareback pad and did some different things on top of Batman with him. And like in a few weeks, he had already stopped doing that. Wow. Which is pretty amazing. But I back out and give the Lord the credit because I'm just facilitating. The models are always a team approach, which is beautiful. And so you have 4 eyes to help because there's so many moving parts going on. So there's always an equine professional with usually 6,000 hours of horse experience, and then a licensed mental health provider, social worker, psychologist, licensed professional counselor.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned earlier you've done research on this, and you actually did your dissertation on this.
Yeah.
Can you tell the listeners a little bit about what you found in your dissertation and what you studied?
Well, I was interested. I wanted to do my dissertation on trauma because I think adverse experiences in early childhood are what is the biggest problem in the population in mental health. And we just don't help parents enough parent, and they don't know what to do. And there's no books that really say, this is what you should do. And so I looked up research on trauma, and I found a paper that said the greatest trauma that a person can experience is preterm birth. And I'm like, what? And it's because as an infant, the injections and the things they experience in that first week of life. And that led me to look at depression and preterm birth and then the benefits of equine therapy. So there, of course, there's no equine therapy for preterm birth, but those that, when we do historical intakes, when we're seeing a patient, we ask, do you happen to know if you were full term or not? Because those that are born early are much more susceptible physiologically and psychologically for mental health disorders and physical problems that we know. So that got me interested in the research. And of course, I took on more than I should have, which is just my personality, but it's also interesting. And then the research was just fascinating, but it was mostly with younger people. But I think the new research is really trying to look at heart rate variability, like that you were talking about. Your sympathetic nervous system decreases when you're with a sentient being. And the factors of, they recognize faces. Like there's new research where they recognize a face and your scent, your personal scent. But the attachment piece is just the biggest piece to me because so many children feel that they don't belong or they're not connected and they don't have a caregiver that may have a mental health challenges or substance abuse. And that horse seems to satisfy those deficits is where the research left. So that was really my research. I was looking at people who had equine therapy and those that hadn't, and how they reported on their attachment style. And so I didn't have a significant, response, but I had something that did lean towards thinking that if I've had equine-assisted psychotherapy, I may have a stronger sense of attachment and decreased mental health symptomology. So,
yeah, this is a hard thing about therapy, and you guys understand this too, that sometimes some of the stuff we study is hard to quantify.
Yeah.
And so that's why we do some qualitative research where it's less about numbers and all that, and it's more anecdotal or things like that. But if equine therapy helps a person, who cares if you can quantify it? What matters is you're helping people.
Right.
So,
that's an excellent point because I don't know a lot of what you guys do. I'm going to be honest, but what I do know is when I see those kids, the laughter, the joy, running around with Harry, when they probably have had a pretty rough day, they we generally do these after dinner time.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids coming from the hospitals, they've been there all day, and they come back to the Ronald McDonald houses, they have their dinner, or we do them at the other organizations. They usually do them after dinner. And these kids are generally pretty exhausted when they walk in, but they just, you can tell. There's no dispute. You don't have to quantify it. You don't have to have a survey to say to these kids when they're walking out, did this help? You just know it. It's in your heart. I mean, it has been given that clear of a sign that what is happening, and I'm sure you see it with the horses too. I'm gonna off screen. I'm gonna have a little talk to you too, because I do have a personal story of horse therapy.
Wow, cool.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, I just read something not long ago that said if you pet the dog with long pets that are strokes, more or less, instead of pat, that it regulates their system better as well as yours, more parasympathetic and relaxed.
Oh, that's interesting.
Uh-huh.
That is cool.
And, with the veterans, working with veterans, they have dogs in so many of their facilities.
Yeah.
Amputees and whatnot.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about a lot of different populations. I mean, hospitals and child abuse survivors and Ronald McDonald illness situations. How do you decide where you take Carrie for these different engagements you have?
We will go anywhere anybody wants us. We have a true passion for the Ronald McDonald houses. We really love what that organization is doing. They're on their 50th year. This is their 50th year. And it's mostly all volunteer organization. And the people who are there are often helping also, whether it's in the kitchen or wherever the help needs in the houses. We just went back to our very first Ronald McDonald house that we went to. We did a second visit there, which was 4 months later. And there were 2 families there that were there 4 months ago. They haven't been able to leave. And those two children, when they saw Harry, their hearts melted because they remembered him and they couldn't wait to see him. They were both the first ones into the room to see Harry again. But we also we have other children's cancer organizations that we have visited. There's one in South Carolina that it's called Courageous Kids. There is also different hospitals that we're affiliated with. We would love one of the areas that we want to actually go into more is on a ministry side, where we do want to start going more heavily onto the ministry end of it, where we can go into maybe church camps or to Christian schools, to here to Liberty University, and we can tell Harry's story. And we want to be well-rounded. We want to be able to hit anywhere that a dog can help people. And that's really where we'll go. Have dog, we'll travel.
That's great. Well, I suspect there's some people listening who are going like, this is so cool, this is so interesting, or I'd love to do that, or whatever. Let me ask you, what are some resources you might refer people to? Like, I don't know if it's a book or an article or some approach. You have a website too, don't you?
Yeah, we have a website, harrysdoghouse.com.
Okay.
And that's where people can go online. One of the ways that we support our mission and Harry's mission is through our stuffed animal program. It's a really cool program. I mean, we heard how these stuffed animals can help. Well, people can help to give them to kids, and they can do that for everyone that's purchased on the website.
Okay.
We donate 4 to kids. So this is really how we can get the stuffed animals out. So we have Christmas coming up. Let's everybody online, all you listeners out there, get them for your kids, your grandkids, your neighbors. Get these stuffed animals, because for everyone, or go to the kids, and that's how we get out to see these different organizations is through that stuffed animal program, and that's a lasting memory for those kids. So it's the important part of it. And then we have a lot of other information about Harry and what he's doing, where he's going, where he's been. So that's really what our website, and Hang with Harry, that's our newest thing. People can get information. Hang with Harry. We can come to your corporation, to your birthday party, and you've heard of birthday parties where people want to give to a charity instead of, well, we bring Harry out to the birthday party and have the stuffed animals, and it's a neat little part of the organization.
Remind us of the website again for Harry.
harrysdoghouse.com. So it's HAIRYS doghouse.com. So yeah.
That's great. And Dr. Kasper, are there any resources you'd recommend people check into about this whole topic?
So the equine-assisted growth and learning model, that's EGALA, so egala.org. And then there's the Natural Lifemanship Institute. You can look them up, Bettina and Tim Joe. They're fabulous at the Natural Lifemanship Institute. And there's fabulous books. Probably Leif Halberg has one that's comprehensive. There's also The Horse and Human Brain by Dr. Jones. That's interesting if you like to understand, because the brain of a horse is interesting because it's almost like a 6-year-old that has experienced trauma. So I think that's one of the reasons. And of course, they're prey animals. So they're always trying to read a person, and they read you quickly, which I think is part of the insight that the person gets by the horse reading it so well. So those are, Monty Roberts is one of the founders. Yeah, it's growing. So yes, there are good books out there.
Yeah, so the evidence for it being an evidence-based approach is certainly growing. Does insurance cover this most of the time or part of the time, or how does that all work?
It's starting to. It depends.
Okay. Yeah.
In some states. It depends on the state, but that's why we're trying to build the evidence for it. But like you were talking about, mine was quantitative research, but we're trying to figure out how do you operationalize it, because there's so many variables. There's different horses, there's different clinicians. So we're really trying to work and need more scientists and people interested in this to build the research on it, to figure out ways that we could make it really generalizable so other people could do it. And that's my heart, is that more people do it and we build the research so they do cover it like they would for massage or something like that. Because I think that's what's the veterans are so ahead of the game, because they're realizing, they actually came up with the sports grant, Congressman Barr, that they give money to different organizations because they're realizing that psychotropic drugs are not the answer. And CBT and DBT and EMDR and all of our different modalities, it's not that they don't help, but they're looking outside the box, which I think is just forward thinking and pioneering. And so, yeah.
That's cool. Well, you mentioned your heart. Keith, let me ask you, what's your heart per se? Like, what message do you hope listeners take away from Harry's story?
Well, I'll tell you a really good story, really good, heartwarming story. And I think that would really sum up what our heart is, because we have a organization that we went to, and we were told when we got there, this was a organization that dealt with kids either going through cancer or had gone through cancer. And when we walked in, we were kind of told what we can expect, the kids that were coming, the families that were coming. And we were prepped with a story of a little girl who at 6 years old was diagnosed with cancer, and she fought it very bravely, and she went into remission. And at 8 years old, a week before we were doing the event, was found out that the cancer came back. And for the last 7 days, they were traveling back and forth 2 hours to a hospital with this little girl performing tests. And the and 2 days after we were leaving, she was going to be starting a treatment. And they told us that she's pretty depressed and can understand why, and that they were going to be showing up late because they were traveling for 2 hours, and that they would probably be getting there about halfway through the event. The little girl walked in, and you could immediately see that this girl was drained. She had a hoodie down over her head. I don't even know how she could walk. She walked into the room and she sat down all by herself. All the other kids were playing with Harry, and I immediately recognized that this was that girl. And I walked over and I sat down next to her, and I said to her, I said, "Would you like to meet Harry?" And she just kind of looked up at me and just kind of nodded a little bit with no emotion. And I called Harry over, and Harry came over and he jumped up on my lap, and I said, "Would you like to pet Harry?" And she took her hand and she just kind of put it on him. And I said, "I bet he would really like it if he could sit on your lap and you could hold him." And I said, "Is that okay?" And she said, "Yeah." So I put Harry over on her. And that next minute was what I consider to be a miracle. What transformed in that 1 minute was absolutely amazing, because in less than 60 seconds, the hoodie was thrown back. She was down on the floor, throwing toys around with Harry, playing with Harry. The other kids were coming over, and her mom and dad were standing there, and her mom looked over at me and said, "She hasn't smiled in a week." And it was at that moment that I knew that the mission that we had hoped for Harry, what we had prayed for with Harry, had just been received. And since then, we've had a lot of other great stories like that have really solidified what I would love your listeners to understand, is that animals, horses, dogs, are important to therapy. And if you're struggling, look at an organization that is working with animals and go that route. Like you said, the drugs, they don't always work. And I truly believe and feel blessed that our prayers were answered with Harry, and this works. It absolutely works. So I encourage your followers to really look at this aspect of therapy.
Well, that's neat how everything you're doing is developing. Let me ask you, what are your dreams for the future? Like what's next for Harry's Doghouse?
Well, we have big dreams with Harry. So what we have right now is Harry. We don't have the doghouse part. Mm-hmm. So there is a doghouse part of it. So the doghouse part of it is, at the beginning I mentioned we had two things that we have a passion for, my wife and I, and that's dogs and travel. So the doghouse part of it is when I retire in a few years, and then my wife retires, and we'll probably actually start it on a smaller term, but we are going to be traveling around in a RV with Harry, and the doghouse is the RV. So that is Harry's RV, his doghouse. So that is what we want to do. So we want to be able to hit town after town after town and take Harry to either this retirement home or a hospital or a children's organization, a church, a Christian school, wherever it is, right along the route. That's what we aspire to do.
That's cool. It's really cool. Well, I appreciate both of you sharing today about animal assisted therapy, horses, dogs, all these different options. Hey, baby.
Here, let's get you on camera.
Yeah, come look at the camera again. Say hey to everybody.
Harry was taking a little nap while we were talking. He had a long trip down today.
Absolutely. He's just adorable. And I hope you listeners are encouraged with what you can do with animal assisted therapy, and maybe find, good professional ways to incorporate it into therapy. But before we wrap up, I always say to all my guests, is there any final thoughts or something God put on your heart or mind you'd like to leave with the listeners before we wrap it up? So either one of y'all would like to share.
I think it's wonderful that you're just looking at different modalities that are often considered out of reach for people, and trying to make these kind of things accessible, horses and dogs, both affordable and insurance would pay for it, or Medicaid. It'd be great because then you could have a further reach. So I think it's about the reach, because there's a lot of people that have never seen a dog or horse, in low socioeconomic environments. So that's my takeaway.
That's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, Matthew 18 talks about the mustard seed, and it's one of my favorite parables, because what we have here is something very small. We have a little dog, we have a horse, but what those little things in life can do can grow into that great tree. And as long as we let God work through what we're doing, we're going to be blessed with great things. And that's what I hope we can take away with the listeners too, is don't look at this as just a little dog, as a little mustard seed. Look at it as something that is growing and big, and that they can help in that aspect of it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for both being here today. I appreciate it. And thanks for bringing Harry, who's just adorable. And listeners, thank you for joining us as well. We appreciate it, and hope you enjoyed learning about animal-assisted therapy and equine-assisted therapy, and working with Harry and all the different resources you shared. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. We hope you join us next time on the Mental Healthy Podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mental Healthy. If you want to hear more episodes, please hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, and head to linktree.com/mentalhealthypodcast for all of our social media platforms with the latest mental healthy content. If you have a story to share that relates to what we discussed in in or any other episode, please contact us at mentalhealthy2020@gmail.com. That's mentalhealthy2020@gmail.com. Thank you, and God bless.